The youth on this team definitely provides for this team to continue to be good. It's something that a lot of people across the league are going to hate. Yo, what is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of NBA Now. It's your boy Dom, and we're going to get right into things here today. So, today, we are looking at the Golden State Warriors, a team coming off of an NBA championship, in which not a lot of people expected to happen. If you guys do want to see how I predicted that they could win the championship, the video will be linked down below. But yeah, honestly, it's kind of crazy that the Warriors were able to go win the championship, get Steph Curry's first Finals MVP this last season, in a season in which, they hadn't made the playoffs the season before. They'd been bad for a couple years. So their turnaround to do that was pretty historical, you know what I mean? And definitely legacy defining for a lot of players on this team. And so headed into this season, can they do it again, right? That's the big question. Was that a fluke? Was it a one-time thing? How are they going to compete with some of the teams getting back to being healthy in the Western Conference, such as the Denver Nuggets, such as the Los Angeles Clippers? And what other teams are going to arise, throughout the season. You look at young teams such as like Minnesota making big trades. You look at Memphis continuing to get better. Obviously being the game scheduled against the Golden State Warriors on Christmas Day, which should be a pretty good game. I think a lot of people are looking forward to that. They're kind of getting a little, the old guys versus the young guys kind of rivalry thing going on there, so that should be an interesting game there on Christmas Day. I know at least I'm excited for it. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments down below. But yeah, when we look at this offseason, they lost Nemanja Bjelica, they lost Chris Chiozza, they lost Andre Iguodala, who it doesn't look like they've re-signed to this point, which is kind of something interesting to think about. They lost Damian Lee, obviously Gary Payton II, Otto Porter, and Juan Toscano, those last three being the more significant losses. Obviously Iggy being a big-time veteran, and a guy that was there back before they even got Kevin Durant, and was there for their first championship as kind of this core was together, is something interesting. We'll see if they end up bringing him back as we get closer to the season. But at this point, they haven't brought him back to the team. And then Bjelica was a solid center forward for them last season, who was kind of able to do some stuff, especially during the regular season. Now in the playoffs, defensively, it just wasn't there. So, a lot of times he wasn't quite out there like that. But, the bigger losses being Gary Payton II, who I think a lot of people are overblowing the loss of this or the addition to the Blazers. I think it's really nice to get Dame, a defensive guy in the backcourt, something that he hasn't really experienced a lot in his career. But it's not like he's going to be starting next to Dame, right? Obviously, Anthony Simons is proven to be a very, very good player. And so there's no reason in which Gary Payton should be starting in that type of thing. Now, he played some backup center for this team, funny enough, last season. His defense, obviously, being very good, especially, off ball and stuff like that, being able to get the steals and kind of run in transition and stuff like that. So that was huge for this team last year, as he continued to get better and kind of make his way into the league. Last season, I think he averaged like 10 or 11 points. But yeah, he goes to the Blazers. I don't think a crazy addition or subtraction. I think he was good, but I think he was just more good on top of the great that the team was last year. And then Otto Porter, I think, would be the bigger one. Obviously, a starter of an NBA Finals team. Those don't leave a lot unless it's like a superstar player. When you're looking at role players, though, like those guys typically aren't, off the boat the next season. But Otto Porter was, right? He went to the Raptors. Kind of fits what they're doing there with their lengthy forwards. They can play both ways and stuff like that. Should provide some good shooting for them and stuff like that. We'll see. Obviously, health has been a concern throughout his career, so I think that's a big reason they weren't too worried about bringing him back, along with some of the youth that we'll talk about here in a little bit. But yeah, Otto Porter leaves to go to the Raptors, a starter in multiple finals games and a key contributor to them winning the finals. So we'll see how they bounce back from that, but I think they definitely have the talent on their roster to kind of replace his production, if not exceed it. So, and then Juan Toscano Anderson, a guy that kind of became a fan favorite the last couple years playing for the Warriors, was able to win the championship and then went to the Los Angeles Lakers. So we'll see how he does there. As for additions, Patrick Bolden Jr., we will get into again more with some of the young guy stuff, but looks like he could be a steal for them in the draft. Dante DiVincenzo is a guy I don't think has been talked about enough being brought to this team. I think when you look at what he did in Milwaukee, it was very, very promising. He was a guy that they didn't even want to get rid of. Obviously, he saw some injury stuff kind of come up and didn't do much since then, especially going to the Kings and stuff like that. But I think he is primed to fill, if not do better than what Gary Payton did when he was playing last. We can go over to Basketball Reference real quick and take a look at what he was doing the last time he was playing. But it was good numbers, right? I am sorry, I cannot find his. Oh, there we go, DiVincenzo. Yeah, so for his career, he averages 9 points per game, 4.6 rebounds, and 2.5 assists. As for the last couple years, obviously, like I said, last year he played 25 games in Sacramento and 25 in Milwaukee, so it was split, had some injury issues. Oh, sorry, he was 25 years old last year. He played 25 games in Sacramento. He did not play 25 in Milwaukee. He played 17 in Milwaukee. Was averaging about 20 minutes per game in Milwaukee, upped that to 26 with Sacramento. Like I said, was coming off some injury stuff, only playing a total of 42 games last year. Has never played more than 66 games, so as a reliable guy for, a whole season, we'll kind of see how that works. But off the bench, I think he'll be solid. In Sacramento, he averaged 10 points per game. In Milwaukee, he averaged 7 last season. The year prior, though, for Milwaukee, he averaged 10 points per game, 1 steal, 3 assists, 5.8 rebounds, shooting 70% from the free throw line, and then 47% overall from 2, as well as 38% from 3. So very, very solid numbers. Like I said, we kind of saw that dip last year due to some injuries. Now, when he was in Sacramento, he averaged some decent splits, at least, especially when you're looking at his three-point percentage. His field goal percentage took a massive dip down to 36%, was actually lower than his three-point percentage, so if that's anything to think of. But I think he'll fit in perfectly well with this team. A solid-sized shooting guard that can play defense and shoot the ball is definitely nothing bad, and I think he'll actually be a better shooter than Gary Payton was for this team. So, again, kind of back to that point of losing Gary Payton, you have other guys on this roster that can kind of replace or exceed that production. Jermichael Green, I think, is a very, very intriguing pickup for this team. I think he could be better than DiVincenzo was for him last year, obviously playing for my Denver Nuggets, and prior to that, playing for the Los Angeles Clippers. A guy that has been solid playing power forward or backup center minutes. He's a guy that'll play both ways. He's going to hustle. Yeah, he's getting a little bit older in his career at this point. But having watched him, he's a guy that when you put him on the court, he doesn't go less than 100%. No matter what, regardless of his age, he's going to go out there and try and do things. And especially, being on a team that is expected to compete for a championship, I think you'll only continue to see that out of him. Obviously, a salary cap dump for us, moving on from him. But I think the Warriors are going to be happy picking him up. As for some other things, we saw Mac McClung be brought to this roster. I'm going to butcher this guy's name, but they brought in an undrafted rookie, Lester Q, is what we're going to say. They also brought in Ryan Rollins, a guy that a lot of people are high on. I honestly don't know a ton about him, so I'm not going to speak too much on him in this video, but I'm sure there's plenty of other videos on YouTube where you guys can find some stuff about him. And then as for re-signings, they brought back Kevin Looney and Quindary Witherspoon. So, not too bad. Yeah, the youth. I think we'll jump into the youth before we get back to the rest of the core. A core that really this could be their last hurrah together. And we'll kind of get to that here in a minute. But yeah, when you look at the youth of this team, you have James Wiseman coming back, a guy that didn't play at all last year for you and was a number 2 overall pick, drafted above LaMelo Ball, a guy who is pretty good at basketball, if I would have to say so myself. Now, obviously, James Wiseman hasn't quite lived up to expectations at this point in time, being drafted above LaMelo and right after Anthony Edwards, 2 guys who are primed for superstardom. James Wiseman he hasn't fit into that top 3 in that quite sense, a lot due to injuries, and I think due to the situation he's been brought into, right? Both of those guys were brought into teams where, at this point, they're looked at as the guy for those franchises, right? The Minnesota Timberwolves heading into the season, the big thing that they want to put themselves in the championship caliber territory is Edwards taking a jump. And then the big thing for the Charlotte Hornets is LaMelo Ball's the team, right? LaMelo Ball is the whole team, the box office, the points, the scoring, the passing, it's all the highlights. He's the team, right? He is their franchise player. So, without question. And so, yeah, Wiseman quite hasn't lived up to those expectations or to even his own draft class at this point. But I expect him to have a bounce back year for them. He's really the only true center on this roster, even when you're looking at additions that they brought in. Like I said, they brought in JaMychal Green, who can play some backup center and stuff like that. He's about 6'8". Kevin Looney played starting center for them. Last season, he's only like 6'8". We saw Bjelica depart from this team. He was playing center for them last season. And Draymond plays some small ball center. He has a lot of his career, but he's only 6'6". So Wiseman being 7'1" is only that guy that can truly raise your ceiling at that center position. And I think him coming back to healthy, obviously he's going to have to fight for minutes. This is a very deep team continually from last season, even with some departures due to some of the additions they've made and some of the other youth on this roster, along with their top-end talent. But I think there is definitely a position in which you could find James Wiseman being a starting center on a championship caliber team this next season. And that shouldn't be too much of a shock. Now we'll see kind of how that works. Obviously, like I said, he's going to have to fight for the minutes, but he's a guy with very, very high potential in this league. And if he captures it, changes this team's future, like forever, right? He's the main talking guy. There's Jonathan Kuminga, who I think we were talking about Otto Porter earlier, leaving to go to the Raptors. Jonathan Kuminga, I think, is also primed to have a big jump this season. You saw them and Steve Kerr show a lot of trust in him last season as a rookie, in the playoffs especially, too. That for, I think, NBA fans in general, we should expect him to take a big sophomore jump this season and become a big rotation player for this team, potentially even starting. I think, his defensive ability, he was drafted with a few-year plan on him to really blossom into a guy, and his rookie year, he was able to show a lot of things and earn the trust of the coaching staff and of these, elite-level shooters and elite-level players that they have on this team, that we should, like I said, we should expect him to really, really ingrain himself in Warriors culture. And, he provides a bridge continually at that small forward, power forward position, where if, like I said, we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but if you don't end up bringing back Wiggins or potentially Draymond, Kuminga can step into that role. And obviously more of a Wiggins role than a Draymond role, but if you're playing him as more of a modern four, that doesn't, hurt you too bad anyways, also. Yeah, what a sentence. Yeah, after that, Moses Moody, a guy that didn't get as much run as Kuminga last year in his rookie season. Obviously, Kendrick Perkins is going to be famous for just his inability to do any sort of draft analysis, especially on Moses Moody, whose name he mispronounced about 100 times on draft night last year. But yeah, I expect him to be a solid player off the bench. He can play some defense. He can shoot the ball. He was drafted with both those in mind. His ceiling, I don't think, is insane, but the fact that he's going to be able to be a rotation player, that loss of Damian Lee or even Otto Porter or Nemanja Bjelica, like some of that shooting that you lost there, you can kind of hope to recoup with the likes of like Moses Moody, Dante DiVincenzo, and guys like that that look and should be good shooters for this team next year. Not like this team really is desperate for shooting. Having Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, the two greatest shooters probably in NBA history. At least the best and then number third, right? That's pretty inarguable at this point, I think. And then when we look at this year's draft, right, bringing in Patrick Baldwin and bringing in Ryan Rollins. Again, I'm not going to talk too much on Ryan Rollins, but Patrick Baldwin himself, he was projected to be a top 10 player headed into the last college season. He was projected that he should be a top 10 pick. Having gone to a smaller school in Milwaukee and then not exactly exceeding expectations there or anything like that, his draft stock kind of plummeted, similar to a guy like Jaden Hardy, who went to the G League, in which we saw him get picked up by the Dallas Mavericks through a trade during draft night. But both those guys were expected to be top players in the draft. I think both of them were picked as sleeper players that will exceed their pick value no matter what. Just the fact that you look at a guy with top 10 potential, unless he busts and just can't reach any of that potential, and he's just a young guy that's athletic, he'll exceed that 28th pick. And another late round steal, just like a Jordan Poole was for this team, that's going to continue to be able to force this team into the future. And when you have some of the stars that should age the best in the league, especially Steph Curry himself, I don't expect this team to really slow down with the continued influx of youth into this roster. And Patrick Baldwin himself, he has the potential to be the best of their young players. Like I said, James Wiseman, prior to his draft, was projected to be like a number 1 pick guy. Ended up going number 2. Hasn't quite lived up to that. That's okay. Jonathan Kuminga was drafted with all the potential in the world in mind. But Patrick Baldwin is right in that category with those other 2, where he was projected to be a star in this league once he reaches his potential. And just due to one season where, we saw a lot of risers in the draft this last season, obviously a very deep draft class, he kind of got lost in the muck of things, and definitely just provides another name for this team. Now, how much he'll do this season, I think it'll be similar to, close to more what a Moses Moody did last year, where you're going to see him in the G League a lot. You'll see him somewhat throughout the regular season. As for like playing more of like a Jonathan Kuminga role, I don't think we'll really see that. I think they want to kind of give more of that opportunity to those guys that they brought in throughout free agency, and obviously those young guys they took the year before. But Baldwin Jr., I think, is definitely a guy that 2 years down the line, you're going to be hearing a little bit more of his name. So yeah, the youth on this team definitely provides for this team to continue to be good. It's something that a lot of people across the league are going to hate, because obviously we've been waiting for the Warriors to stop being good since they started, right? Ever since the Warriors-Cavs finals matchups began, we've been ready for this to end. A lot of people have, at least, especially when you look at Kevin Durant. I think joining the Warriors, right? I think prior to that, you saw a lot of the league behind this team. Hey, this is a young team. This is different. This is new. It's shooting. It's modern basketball taken to the extreme. Now, obviously, we've seen the Rockets and stuff like that take it even further since then. But they were the new kids on the block, and now they're the kids that at this point are the adults, right? They're aging out of being the top talent or being the necessarily league favorites year in and year out, yet they still have the talent like we saw last year, where not a lot of people picked them to win the championship. And what did they do? They came out and they took care of business, won it, and showed that they didn't need necessarily Kevin Durant to win it. So I think partially tarnishing some of Kevin Durant's legacy by doing so, but very impressive what they were able to do last season, and I expect that to continue. Like I said, this could be the last year of this core together, with multiple guys coming up on contract years, and multiple guys that are pretty key to this roster. Obviously, I've mentioned Jordan Poole and Andrew Wiggins and Draymond Green kind of throughout this video, but when we kind of look into their contract situations, I want to make sure I get everything specifically right with the contract situations of this team. But like Draymond Green, if we look at him here for a second, he is, as long as it doesn't want to take me to an ad, that would be cool. Sorry about that again. Yeah, Draymond Green, right? So we look at what he has done for this team. He's been a 4-time All-Star, right? A long-time veteran for this team. A guy that just this last season was very key in them winning the championship, but was benched in the finals. So is he a guy that you look to bring back following this season? Obviously, he's part of your big three, if you want to call it that, between Klay Thompson, him, and Steph Curry, the guys that are your core and have been your core. But he is headed into his age 32 season this year. We've seen a steep decline since really back to like 2017, 2018, when he was averaging 11 points per game, the last year that he made the All-Star team before this last season, in which he was still looked at as a top defensive player in the league. And now, yes, he's still a top defensive player in the league. We've seen him play less and less games, though, since then, with more injuries. We've seen him be played off the court in situations like we were talking about this last season. But when we look, again, at his contract, he is on his final year of his deal, but I think he'll get brought back. I don't know if he's necessarily a guy that wants to take less money, but I think at least Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, they're going to advocate to bring him back. And if you're the Warriors, you don't piss off the best player in your franchise history just because you think it would be smarter, potentially, going forward to not bring Draymond back. So I think it's best if this team can get him back on I don't know, you can give him $20 million a season. But if you're getting to the point in which you are having to pay Draymond Green $30 million plus a season, that's not a contract that works. It's not a contract that works at this point, especially a long-term contract that definitely doesn't work. I think Jordan Poole is a lock to probably come back to this team, kind of Steph Curry Jr., if you want to say that for lack of better words. A guy that's clearly learned a lot from him, and Steph Curry has loved, or it seems, from the eyes of the public, loved the mentoring role of Jordan Poole, right? Jordan Poole's taken a lot of his mannerisms, taken a lot of his charm and charisma in the media, and continued to exceed expectations from where he was. I mean, when you talk about that last three of that draft, with him, with Kevin Porter Jr., and with Keldon Johnson, right? It's a picture that flies across Instagram occasionally, and it's like, hey, this might be the last three, or the best last three draft picks of the first round for an NBA draft in NBA history, right? Because and a lot due to Jordan Poole, right? That statement isn't said without him. A guy that when he was kind of let the ability to take over last year was able to average all NBA numbers as the main guy for the show there for a little bit, and he's a guy that's going to warrant a lot of money, so we'll see what he does this next season. It's something that will be a make or break whether he continues his career as a Golden State Warrior. I think if he plays too good, it might not work to just bring him back on a $25 million a year contract or something like that, because he averaged 18 last year. But if he averages like 24 points per game as like a second to fourth option on this team, if he makes an all-star game, I mean, I think, like I said, I think he's a lock to bring back, but there's a very real situation in which his trade value goes up exponentially throughout the league, and his value goes up a lot, in which you don't feel comfortable necessarily paying him how much you're going to be paying him to play next to Steph Curry in a full-time starting role, especially, since neither of them are fantastic defenders. If you look at Draymond Green continuing to age, there's so many factors to factor in. So Jordan Poole, in my opinion, should be the lock for this team to bring back out of the three guys I listed. But there's definitely a very real possibility in which that doesn't happen, and he potentially goes and is kind of the main guy for his own team. Obviously, plenty of youth around the league, but great point guard play is definitely nothing to sneeze at, and is definitely something that would be valued across the league. So it could fetch something very good in trade. And then the last guy, obviously, would be Andrew Wiggins, a guy who we saw have a roller coaster of a career to this point, in which we saw him start off being the number one overall pick to the Cleveland Cavaliers, eventually being traded quickly being traded to the Minnesota Timberwolves for Kevin Love, in which kind of brought about the return of LeBron, or with the return of LeBron, all of that together. A guy that was expected to be the Maple Mamba, the next guy, right? He had so much hype about him coming into the league, the next Kobe, the next LeBron. Never quite reached that in Minnesota. A guy that, started playing point guard, was doing all these different things in Minnesota just to try and make it work. Eventually it doesn't work. He gets traded for D'Angelo Russell to the Golden State Warriors, in which he's kind of given a year where he can kind of do his thing due to a lot of injuries and just get integrated to the system, while also just being able to be the best player on the court for them. And we saw him kind of exceed in that. And then Draymond Green really took him under his wing as hey dude, you can unlock something for us, and we saw that exactly happen. Now, he made the All-Star team in a controversial way to a lot of people this last season, but he did make the All-Star team, right? Finally became an All-Star, a guy that's had a up and down career, like I said, his whole time in the league. But a guy now, I think that a lot of people have a different perspective on. I think him helping this team win a championship, how big he was for them in the finals. I mean, this was a guy that was, he was getting 20 games in the NBA finals as a small forward for the majority of the game. Power forward also at some points, especially when you're talking about Draymond at center. But yeah, I mean, he was the second best player for them in the NBA finals. And it's a guy, right, he can play defense. He's really leaning into that. He can score the ball. He's always been able to, and he's his scoring ability has only been expanded, I think, by being able to play with such great shooters and being integrated into the Warrior system, in which, yeah, he can still make those long-range twos that he was so enamored with early in his career. But now, he's expanded to shooting the three a little bit more, and especially not being the main option, he has a lot of pressure taken off of him in that regard. So his ability to be their second best player in the NBA Finals last year was definitely something that this team has to consider headed forward, right? He is a guy that, he's got potential to continue to get better with this team. He's only 26 years old, so younger than Draymond. If I'm this team, I'm okay moving on from Draymond after this season. If you're retaining Wiggins and Poole, I think the most likely scenario is 2 of the 3 guys that I've listed are retained after this season. And I think that Draymond will be one of them, even though at that point I think it may not be the best idea for this team, but he is the most unique player of the 3. So retaining him could be the best option as well. But yeah, like I said, this could be this team's last hurrah. So this team definitely can win the NBA championship this season. This team definitely should be looked at as a threat. And I know a lot of people have them as like a favorite right now or as the top, but they also they're not guaranteed it, right? There's a lot of teams coming back there to provide a lot of competition. So I'm excited to see what the Warriors do this next season. I think the sky's the limit for this team, not only this year, but for the next 10 years. I mean, we talked about some of the youth on this team. Jordan Poole's right in that mix. He's only like 24, 23 years old. So if you end up bringing him back and stuff like that, like there's a lot of future for this team that just won the NBA championship with one of the oldest all-time greats on their team. So we'll see what they kind of do. Obviously, the Warriors are always exciting to talk about and to watch. So can't wait for this next season. Obviously, basketball cannot come soon enough as we are in the dead of August, like the worst time for the NBA when it comes to watching or anything about it. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you guys think the Warriors can do this next season. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the new mic. I had seen some comments about potentially getting a new mic. I was already looking at that point. And I ended up finding a Yeti mic. So hopefully it isn't too echoey. I know sometimes like these can be a little bit echoey, but hopefully it's pretty good quality and you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you guys think about that as well down below. And yeah, I'll catch you all next time. Peace out, guys.